Hi, welcome back to the Petersen Automotive Museum YouTube channel. I'm your favorite associate curator, Johnny Eisen, and today we're talking about America's first post-war sports car from a large manufacturer. This is the 1954 Nash Healey Le Mans Coupe. So first of all, what is a sports car? This car might not look like what we think of as a sports car. Usually sports cars are small, light, nimble cars, not necessarily with a lot of horsepower, but with adequate horsepower to make them fun to drive. After World War II, sports cars were something of a craze here in America. Returning GIs from the Second World War were looking for similar types of thrills and excitement that they experienced in the theater of war. One thing that they discovered in Europe were cars built by manufacturers like MG or Triumph, small little cars that were fun to drive, also required a lot of tinkering. These soldiers had learned a lot of mechanical skills on the battlefield, and this translated over into a love of cars and a love of working on cars. So it took a few years for American manufacturers to catch up on the sports car market. Of course, the best known is the Corvette, which debuted in 1953 and was really the first American sports car produced in huge numbers. But in 1951, mid-sized manufacturer Nash-Kelvinator beat them to the punch with the Nash Healey. One of the unique things about the Nash Healey is its multinational pedigree. It was built by both a British company and an American company and features a design by an Italian design house. Healey was started by Donald Healey, a former race car driver who was quite successful before World War II. After the war, he started his own company to produce sports cars. The first car he manufactured was the somewhat stuffy Jaguar-inspired Westland Roadster, a very unusual looking car that used a four-cylinder engine from another British marque, Riley. In 1949, he took a trip to America. The idea was that he would hopefully buy Cadillac V8 engines from General Motors to put them in the Silverstone to beef up its performance. On the way there, he met a man named George Mason, who was the president of Nash. Now, Nash, again, was a mid-sized American company. They had a very stodgy image, and they were looking to kind of elevate their company with a halo car. When Healey told Mason about his plans to buy V8s from GM, Mason knew that that was going to fall through. And he said, look, if this isn't successful, call me because I have an idea for maybe a joint venture on a sports car. Of course, GM decided not to sell engines to Donald Healey, and he contacted George Mason, and they got to work coming up with an idea for a sports car through their combined efforts. So Healey started with a modified version of their Silverstone chassis. Nash would then send over high compression six-cylinder engines to be put in the new sports car, which was designed by Donald Healey himself. It was a very pretty car, but had very conventional looks. So after a year of production, Nash decided they wanted something unique, and they hired the Italian design house Pinin Farina to refresh this Nash Healey sports car. The first versions of which were open-top roadsters, and after a few years of production, they came out with this very pretty coupe version. So the Nash Healey had a somewhat complicated manufacturing process, with engines having to be shipped from America to England, put in cars, and then these cars were shipped back to America. The Nash Healey had a pretty high price. It cost over $4,000 in 1951. That was more than a Jaguar, and as such, they only sold 104 of these cars the first year. This is what prompted the restyle demand from George Mason. They also bumped the horsepower from 135 to 140. The engine was made bigger from 3.8 liters to 4.1 liters. They also entered the car in competition, and as a matter of fact, in 1952, a Nash Healey finished third in its class at Le Mans. Later, when they came out with the coupe version, they used the Le Mans name to sort of highlight that sporting pedigree. So Pinin Farina's redesign of this car has always been kind of controversial. It's very unusual to see the headlights trapped within the grille. Now, cars have faces, as we all know. We tend to anthropomorphize anything, and cars are easy to do that too because of the headlights look like eyes, and you have a grille, which could be a mouth, or a bumper, which could be a mouth. Here, the eyes are set inside the grille, so the eyes are a little bit too close together, and I think for some people that's a little unsettling. I've been looking at this car for a long time, and I actually find it quite attractive, but it is very different. Now, Nash wanted something to stand out. They were smaller than the big three, and they wanted their cars to look different. And they actually did use this basic grille design on the rest of their passenger cars, not just on this high-priced sports car. Now, looking at it, you wonder where else would you put the headlights? Maybe on the fenders, but then the eyes are kind of too far apart. So it sort of works for me. Also, the rest of the car is really quite pretty. It has this swooping line down the side inspired by the French Talbot logo. And it is also a great color. This blue is really something unique that you don't see on a lot of cars from that era. One of the things I really like about this car and its design is the fact that there isn't much chrome frippery on it. You just have the bumpers, this really nice window frames, and of course these very classy wire wheels. This is unusual for mid-50s cars. Mid-50s American cars especially were swathed in chrome, but this is a pretty clean design. The wire wheels, of course, are dressed in Vredestein Sprint Classic tires. These tires give the car a vintage look, but they're made with modern materials and modern technology. These tires are a great solution if you really want to use your classic car, take it to Cars and Coffee, or perhaps drive it to work a few days a week, and still keep a vintage look. So the Nash Healey had very good performance. It was fun to drive. It had unique looks. It was really quite a good sports car for the time. But they only sold just over 500 of them in 3 years of production. And that was mostly due to the high price. A lot of people will say that this car was something of a failure because they didn't sell very many, but it kind of served its purpose. It brought new attention to Nash and did actually boost their reputation. It also opened up the American market to the Healey Company, who would then go on to make some legendary cars in partnership with another British manufacturer, Austin. The interior of the Nash Healey is very comfortable and also very pretty. You've got really lovely gauges here with these kind of gold faces. You've got a clock, you've got a radio, 3-speed with overdrive transmission, shifter on the floor like a proper sports car, this nice banjo steering wheel, and it's really a nice place to be. Not as Spartan as many other European sports cars of the time. This was really designed for an American customer. You've got a bench seat in front here, which is also very American. Most European cars had bucket seats in front. The other thing about the Nash Healey is it's really solidly built. It's not kind of rickety like a lot of those early MGs from Britain or even Triumphs. We can see that when we close the door. A very satisfying sound of a very solidly built body. So this car is essentially a 2-seater, possibly 3 if you want to fit a kid in the center of the bench seat. One of the reasons is that Nash gave it a pretty substantial trunk with a full-size spare in back. Also, another thing that belies its well-built quality is the fact that this trunk lid is extremely heavy. Most sports cars are supposed to be light and nimble, and relative to a lot of other cars, this was, but it really was no MG, I can tell you that. All right, so that's a brief look at America's first sports car. It's up here on the 3rd floor, the Otis Booth History floor, across from the How We Roll tire exhibit. If you haven't already, please check out the videos on the history of tires. I'm Johnny Eisen. Don't forget to subscribe to keep up to date on all our videos. And when you're in Los Angeles, come and visit us here at the Petersen Automotive Museum.